Hey everybody, Bobby Ginto here, and today I'd like to review a game that I picked up from GOG.com called Knock Knock. I had never heard anything about this game before I picked it up on sale, but it caught my eye because it was supposed to be a scary kind of game. Now I love horror movies, so I thought, what could be better than also a horror game? So I went and I played through it, and I'd like to present to you an overview, my thoughts about the game. I did one playthrough that took about 3 hours and 15 minutes. Now I'd like to go over the mechanics and talk about all of the aspects of the game as I currently understand them. I don't have all the answers to this kind of strange, mysterious game, and there are parts that I'm still confused about that I've purposely not looked into at this point, so I can give you guys kind of a one run-through opinion of the game. This also means that there's going to probably be some spoilers that I had to figure out on my own as time went on. So if you would like the majority of this game to be a mystery when you happen to play it, you might want to turn back now. So, with that being said, here we go. Now one thing I'd like to show you is something that you saw in the very beginning, the intro page. Let me briefly read the top paragraph. It says, "What you see before you is not exactly what one would call a game. It's more like an interactive meditation, reenacted from scattered evidence that happened to fall into our hands." I'm pointing this out because I think it sets a tone for the overall game, and we'll get back to this at the very end of the review. Our hero seems to be a lonely, middle-aged man who may or may not be going insane. He is clearly being haunted by something, but whether it be ghosts, his own mind, or time itself is purposely left in the air. Oftentimes, it's hard to know if it's happening all in his head, or if it's actually happening in real life. He also has a very quirky way of talking to you. I initially imagined that this was a voiceover, cost-cutting measure. However, as the game progressed, I admit that it grew on me. The controls are quite simple. Left and right will move you across the floors. Holding a space bar will turn on the broken lights that are in each dark room to begin with. Hitting the space bar after the light is fixed will turn that light on and off. And the W and S keys will move you between floors via the ladder. Pressing E, or up, will allow you to interact with in-world objects, such as hiding behind a piece of furniture to avoid one of the guests you'll come across, or interacting with the Time Man, who helps time pass and is the main vehicle for progressing in the game. There appears to be 3 different level types that you will come across in this game. As the map shows, you alternate between a house icon and an eye icon. After a long time to ponder this over, I've come to the conclusion that the house level is probably real life as this guy sees it. The eye level is so strange that I think they're a representation of his dreams. The forest is a 3rd level type, which sits in between each house and dream level. However, this is not shown on the map. The house level is very straightforward. The house itself is quite small, and the goal is just to find the Time Man. Once you do, the front door opens, and then you can go out into the forest and begin that level. If you didn't care to explore the house, you could get past this part very quickly. However, one thing that seems to be a sub-goal of the house level is to find journal pages. They are often cryptic-sounding passages that I personally was unable to apply to the game itself. The GOG.com description has a bullet point that reads, "The lodger has lost something very important. The reason for what is happening is somewhere inside. Everything that is happening can be explained. You only need to find the key and bring it to light." Now, our hero makes several comments about how he must find these journal pages, so I kind of believe that this is what the description is referring to. Unfortunately, though, in my playthrough and even afterwards, these journal pages didn't seem to make any difference to the game at all. You could leave the house without actually finding any of them, or so it seemed. Aside from a cryptic clue that may or may not mean anything to you, I'm still unsure of their actual relevance to the game. The woods serve as a go-between from the normal house levels to the dream levels. Our hero's job is simply to find his house, or at least what he thinks is his house, and walk inside. It is perhaps the most tedious part of the game. At first, I was just walking, forever hoping that I would just be able to find the house and move on. But then, I found a girl standing in the woods, and I have to admit, the first time it happened, it kind of spooked me. I decided to check her out, and a strange art sequence occurred. I wasn't able to interact with it, yet it was strangely enjoyable. I went back to try it again, and I got a different art scene. I'm not sure if you're supposed to look for this girl, or try to avoid her, but seeing the colorful sequences was fun enough. At one point, various other people began to appear in the woods in addition to the girl. My first run through, they were a non-issue. It seemed like a good idea to avoid them, and I had no real trouble doing so. Just for fun, though, I went back and decided to collect as many of these people as possible just to see what would happen. Turns out, if you run into enough of them, that ends your game, and you have to start the level all over again. The dream level is where the real fun begins. Your goal is to stay alive long enough until dawn arrives. The house is now full of several guests that are trying to make sure you don't make it that long. You can tell your progress by looking at the clock that is in the shape of our hero's head in the upper left corner. If you come across the Time Man, he will give you some additional time to bring you closer to morning. I personally found this to be a very interesting game mechanic. Not only does the time passing signify the completion of the level, but it also acts like a life meter. If you happen to run into a house guest, your time will get knocked back a good chunk, a couple hours. If your clock gets back to the starting position, your life is over, and you have to start the level again. However, if you have enough time to spare when you run into a house guest, your clock will get reverted a few hours, and you'll stay alive.
Can you hear me coming?
Another thing to note is that in this stage, the house begins fairly empty. As our hero enters a room, he will close his eyes and some furniture will appear. Not all of the furniture is worthy of being hidden behind, however, so you may have to leave the room and come back to ensure that all decor has appeared. If you manage to hide in time when a guest is on your tail, it will spare your life for that time, as well as providing an interesting visual sequence. Now, okay, I know that in the beginning of the video, I said that I only played this game 3.5 hours. But in truth, during the making of this video, I had to go back and play it again several times because it became very compelling to try to answer the outstanding questions I had about this game. By now, I've put in a good number of hours, and I'm still unclear as to whether I finished this game or not. If you remember the disclaimer from the beginning of the video, it stated that this wasn't a game, but more an interactive meditation. After my first playthrough, I thought that this message was a cop-out. I thought that it was something to cover the fact that this game had no real point or ending. But after going back and playing it a few more times, I can't say that my feelings have stayed the same. Underneath all the mystery, I feel like there is potential for the entire game to be all tied together if I just play one more time and try something just a little bit different. I'm not sure if this was their intention, but it actually raised the replayability of this game quite a bit to me. The ramblings that the hero muttered every few minutes were at first incoherent and pointless to me, But as time went on, I swear I was extracting life lessons out of his wise words. And I'll repeat that after all this time I've spent trying to unlock the mystery of this game, I'm still not finished, and I still feel like I have the urge to play more. Finally, I would like to summarize with my own personal scoring based on these 4 categories. I give the artwork a 4.5. It is one of the most beautiful looking 2D art pieces that I have seen in recent memory. It all appears to be quite unique and made from scratch just for this game. The silly sequences were also just beautiful. The artists who pulled this together must have spent an incredible amount of time to do this, and it really shows. The game even comes with a do's and don'ts PDF file, which offers advice about the game from presumably the folks who created it. I really felt that was a nice touch. For the atmosphere, I give it a 4. There are several pieces of information about this game that try and explain to you how important it is to set up the atmosphere of the room you're playing in. All I happened to do was turn the lights off while I played, and I admit that this game was incredibly creepy. The sound effects played a major role in that as well. I also jumped quite a number of times, and more often than not I felt kind of uneasy while playing. Considering that I consider myself no stranger when it comes to horror movies, I have to think that this game was doing something right. The gameplay I rate at 2.5. For what it was, it did it well. Smooth animations during travel, no hiccups or any other obvious glitches. It delivered what it intended to. My slightly lower rating is due to the fact that the game design itself does not include a ton of gameplay. What it offers is not bad. It just doesn't offer more than what is needed to facilitate the progression of the stages. The replayability I also rate at a 2.5. While I am telling the truth about getting the urge to keep playing and experimenting, I can't picture myself coming back to this every 6 months like I might with some other classics. At some point, I will hopefully unlock the big picture, and once I do, the replayability may be used up at that point. And the average score for this game turns out then to be a 3.5. Overall, I really enjoyed this game. I'm glad that I spent the time trying to unravel its mystique. Considering that at full price, this game is being sold for $10, a score of 3.5 says to me that it is certainly a good game worth checking out. I would like to thank the developer and publisher Ice Pick Lodge for putting out this little quirky, scary, silly gem. And lastly, I would love to thank everyone for watching. This has been Bobby Ginto, and I'll see you next time.